Have you ever wondered what it would be like to attend your own funeral? Not in some distant philosophical way, but actually being there, conscious, aware, watching every single moment unfold, while being completely powerless to scream, to move, to let anyone know that you're still there, still fighting, still alive inside a body that everyone believes is already gone? I never thought I'd have to answer that question, but on a cold November morning, I found myself doing exactly that, and what I experienced changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the thin, terrifying line that separates the two. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what happened to me, what I saw, what I felt, and how a man that nobody paid attention to became the only person who could see the truth that everyone else missed. This is my story, and I need you to understand that every word I'm about to share with you is real. Every emotion was lived. Every moment of terror was felt in the deepest parts of my soul. And if you've ever taken a single breath for granted, if you've ever dismissed someone because of their job or their status, if you've ever wondered whether miracles actually exist in this world, then you need to hear what happened to me, because it will shake you to your core. It started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind of day where you go through your routine without really thinking about it, where you kiss your loved ones goodbye without realizing it might be the last time, where you make plans for tomorrow as if tomorrow is guaranteed. I remember waking up feeling slightly off. Nothing dramatic, just a persistent headache that had been bothering me for a few days. The kind of thing you dismiss with aspirin and coffee. The kind of warning sign your body gives you that you're too busy to notice. I was 34 years old, healthy, active, with a beautiful wife named Sarah and 2 kids who were my entire world. A demanding job that kept me working long hours, and a life that felt full and purposeful and exactly where it was supposed to be. I had no idea that within hours everything would shatter, that my family would be planning my funeral, that I would become a prisoner inside my own body, watching helplessly as the world moved on without me. The headache got worse as the morning progressed, a sharp stabbing pain behind my right eye that made it hard to concentrate on the presentation I was supposed to give at work, but I pushed through because that's what you do, right? You push through the discomfort, you meet your obligations, you don't let people down over something as simple as a headache. I remember being in the conference room, standing in front of my colleagues talking about quarterly projections and market strategies, when suddenly the pain exploded into something I had never experienced before, like someone had detonated a bomb inside my skull, and the world tilted sideways, and the last thing I heard before everything went dark was someone screaming my name, though the voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a very long tunnel. When I woke up, I wasn't really awake, not in any way that made sense, not in any way that I could explain to the doctors or my family or anyone who might have been able to help me. I could hear everything, every sound, every voice, every footstep in the hospital room, but I couldn't open my eyes, couldn't move a single finger, couldn't make my chest rise and fall with my own breath because machines were doing that for me now, pumping air into my lungs with a rhythmic hiss that became the soundtrack to my nightmare. I had suffered a massive brain aneurysm, a catastrophic rupture of a blood vessel that had been silently weakening for years, a ticking time bomb that finally exploded, and according to the doctors whose voices I heard discussing my case in clinical, detached tones, the damage was severe, the prognosis was grim, and the chances of meaningful recovery were virtually non-existent. They used words like vegetative state and brain death and quality of life, and each word felt like another nail being hammered into my coffin. Except I wasn't dead. I was right there, screaming inside my own head, begging them to see me, to know that I was still present, still conscious, still desperately clinging to existence even as they discussed letting me go. The medical term for what I was experiencing is locked-in syndrome, though I wouldn't learn that term until much later, after everything that happened, after the miracle that saved me, after I could finally speak again and research what I had endured. Locked-in syndrome is a condition where you're completely paralyzed, unable to move anything except maybe your eyes in some cases, but fully conscious, fully aware, trapped inside a body that has become your prison, and it's one of the most terrifying experiences a human being can endure because you're essentially buried alive inside yourself, screaming into a void that nobody can hear. In my case, I couldn't even move my eyes, couldn't blink, couldn't give any sign whatsoever that I was still in there, still fighting, still desperately trying to communicate with the world that was making decisions about my life, without knowing that I could hear every single word. I heard the neurologist tell my wife that the scans showed minimal brain activity, that the parts of my brain responsible for consciousness had been too severely damaged, that even if I somehow survived, I would never be the person she married, never recognize my children, never have any quality of life worth preserving. I heard Sarah sobbing, a sound that shattered my heart into pieces I didn't know could break any smaller, and I screamed and screamed and screamed inside my head, trying to reach her, trying to tell her I was still here, but the screams never made it past the prison walls of my own skull. Days blurred together in that hospital room, marked only by the changing shifts of nurses, the visits from my family, and the increasingly somber conversations happening around my bedside. I learned things about my condition that I never wanted to know, like the fact that my insurance would only cover life support for a limited time, that decisions would need to be made about my care, that my family was being forced to consider options that no family should ever have to consider. I heard my mother, a woman who had always been strong and unshakable, break down completely, telling Sarah that maybe it was time to let me go, that maybe keeping me on machines wasn't mercy but cruelty, that maybe I would want to be free from this rather than trapped in whatever darkness I was experiencing. If I could have cried, I would have flooded that room with tears, but even that release was denied to me. Even that basic human expression of grief and fear was beyond my reach. I wanted to tell them that I wasn't in darkness, that I was right there with them, that I could feel my mother's hand holding mine, that I could smell Sarah's perfume when she leaned close to whisper in my ear, that I was fighting with everything I had to come back to them. But the gap between my consciousness and my body had become an uncrossable chasm, and I was stranded on the wrong side, invisible and voiceless. Have you ever felt completely helpless? I mean truly, utterly helpless, where nothing you do matters, where you have no control over anything happening to you or around you? Comment below if you've ever experienced a moment where you felt powerless, because I want you to know you're not alone, and I want you to understand what I'm about to tell you next, because what happened in those days following my aneurysm tested every limit of human endurance I didn't know I had. After 2 weeks in the ICU, after countless tests and scans and consultations, after my family had exhausted themselves with vigils and prayers and hopes that kept getting crushed by medical reality, the doctors sat down with Sarah and my parents and told them what they'd been dreading to hear, that it was time to consider withdrawing life support, that my brain activity had not improved, that all indicators suggested I was gone in every way that mattered, and that keeping my body functioning on machines was only prolonging the inevitable and making it harder for everyone to begin the grieving process and move forward with their lives. I heard every word of that conversation, heard the doctor's gentle but firm tone, heard my father's angry objection, heard Sarah's quiet question about whether there was any chance, any possibility, any reason to hope, and heard the doctor's response that sometimes hope can be a form of suffering, that sometimes letting go is the most loving thing we can do. The decision was made to withdraw life support in 3 days, which meant I had 72 hours to somehow break through this prison, to make someone see me, to give some sign that I was still present. And I tried everything I could think of, focusing all my energy on moving just one finger, on opening my eyes even a fraction, on making any sound at all. But nothing worked, nothing changed, and the hours ticked away with relentless cruelty. My family started making funeral arrangements, a fact I learned by overhearing phone calls and whispered conversations, and the surreal horror of hearing your own funeral being planned while you're still conscious is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's a special kind of torture that goes beyond physical pain, beyond emotional grief, into some realm of existential terror that fundamentally changes how you understand reality. They chose a casket. I heard Sarah describing it to my mother, a simple oak coffin because I had always preferred simplicity. They selected readings and music. They wrote an obituary that summarized my life in a few hundred words that seemed both accurate and completely inadequate. They notified friends and colleagues and distant relatives, and with each arrangement, I felt myself slipping further away from the world, not because I was dying, but because the world was actively preparing to let me go. The funeral was scheduled for 2 days after they would withdraw life support, giving my body time to die once the machines were turned off, though of course nobody knew that my body was still very much alive, that my consciousness was still burning bright even if all their tests and monitors couldn't detect it. The night before they were supposed to remove the ventilator, Sarah stayed late in my room, holding my hand and talking to me about our life together, sharing memories of our first date, our wedding, the births of our children, all the moments that had made our life meaningful. And she told me it was okay to let go, that she would take care of the kids, that she would make sure they remembered me, that she loved me enough to release me from whatever I was experiencing. Her words were meant to comfort, meant to give me permission to die in peace, but they had the opposite effect because I wasn't ready to go. I didn't want her permission to leave. I wanted her to somehow know that I was still fighting, still present, still desperately in love with her and our life together. I focused every ounce of will I possessed on moving something, anything, on squeezing her hand even the tiniest amount, and I felt something shift inside me, some connection sparking to life, some pathway opening that had been blocked. But before anything could happen, a nurse came in to check my vitals, and Sarah left shortly after, and whatever moment of possibility had existed slipped away into the night. The next morning arrived with the weight of finality, the day they would turn off the machines, the day my family would gather to say their final goodbyes, the day I would presumably take my last breath and release my family from this vigil of suffering. They came in waves throughout the morning, my parents first, then Sarah's parents, then my siblings, then close friends, each person taking their turn to stand beside my bed and say whatever they needed to say, to cry, to pray, to share one last moment with someone they believed was already gone. I listened to it all, absorbed every word, felt every tear that fell on my hand, and experienced a grief so profound it seemed impossible that my heart could continue beating under its weight. My children came last, brought by Sarah's sister because Sarah couldn't bear to have them see their father like this, and hearing my daughter's small voice asking why Daddy wouldn't wake up, why he wouldn't open his eyes and smile at her like he always did, broke something inside me that I didn't know could break, and I would have given anything, sacrificed anything, to open my eyes and reassure her that Daddy was still here, still loved her, still wanted nothing more than to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't, and the machines were turned off, and I waited to die, except I didn't die. Not right away, because apparently my body was stronger than anyone expected. My lungs kept trying to breathe on their own even without the ventilator. My heart kept beating with stubborn determination, and what the doctors had predicted would take minutes or maybe an hour stretched into hours and then into the next day. They moved me to a private room, a place where my body could die with some dignity, where my family could sit with me during my final moments, and the funeral that had been scheduled was postponed, then rescheduled, then postponed again, as my body refused to cooperate with everyone's expectations. After 3 days of this limbo, with my vital signs slowly weakening but not stopping, with my family exhausted and emotionally devastated by the prolonged goodbye, the decision was made to proceed with the funeral anyway, to hold a memorial service while my body was still technically alive but clearly dying, because everyone needed closure, everyone needed to begin healing, and watching me slowly fade away was causing more suffering than anyone could bear. So that's how I ended up attending my own funeral, conscious and aware, trapped inside a body that was shutting down but hadn't quite given up, listening to eulogies and remembrances and tributes to a life that I wasn't finished living. The service was held in the hospital chapel, a small, tasteful room with wooden pews and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the faces of the people I loved. My body was there, wheeled in on a hospital bed because I wasn't dead enough for a casket yet, covered in a white sheet, connected to minimal monitoring equipment, and positioned at the front of the chapel like some grotesque centerpiece to my own memorial. I could hear everything. The organ music playing softly, the shuffle of feet as people took their seats, the whispered conversations and muffled sobs, and the overwhelming sense that I was witnessing something fundamentally wrong, something that shouldn't be happening because I was still here, still fighting, still refusing to accept that this was the end. Sarah spoke first, her voice breaking as she talked about our love story, about the man I had been, about the father and husband I would always be remembered as, and every word felt like a goodbye I wasn't ready to hear, like a door closing on a life I still wanted to live. My best friend shared stories that made people laugh through their tears. My father read a poem that had me screaming internally because I wanted to tell him I was proud to be his son, that I wasn't ready to leave him, and my daughter, my sweet 7-year-old daughter, stood up and sang a song we used to sing together at bedtime, and that moment destroyed me in ways that physical death never could have. I don't know how much time passed during the service. Time had become meaningless in my trapped state, but at some point, I became aware of someone new in the room, someone who wasn't family or friend, someone whose presence felt different from all the mourners gathered to say goodbye. Through the fog of my consciousness, I sensed rather than saw this person moving around the periphery of the chapel, and later I would learn it was Marcus, the night janitor at the hospital, a 63-year-old man who had worked in that building for 27 years, cleaning floors and emptying trash and being essentially invisible to everyone who passed him in the halls, the kind of person that society trains us not to see, not to acknowledge, not to value beyond their function. Marcus had apparently been cleaning the chapel earlier and had stayed in the back when the service started, not wanting to interrupt, just going about his work quietly while my life was being celebrated and mourned, and what happened next would prove that God or fate or the universe has a strange way of placing the right person in the right place at exactly the right time, even when that person is someone nobody else is paying attention to. As the service was winding down, as the pastor was giving final words of comfort and preparing to dismiss everyone to a reception in another room, Marcus was apparently walking past my bed, probably to collect something or clean something, when he stopped, and in that moment of stopping, in that pause in his routine, he noticed something that everyone else had missed, something that all the doctors and nurses and specialists and family members had failed to see because they had already accepted that I was gone, that the person in that bed was just a shell, just a body going through the motions of dying. But Marcus saw what nobody else saw. He noticed what everyone else had missed. And his observation would be the difference between life and death, between being buried alive in my own body forever and getting a chance to come back to the world I loved. What did he see? What did this janitor notice that all the medical professionals had overlooked? I couldn't know in that moment. I couldn't see what was happening around me. I could only feel a shift in the energy of the room, sense something changing, and then I heard Marcus's voice, uncertain and apologetic, saying, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think something's wrong." And I felt a surge of hope so powerful it was almost painful, because someone had finally noticed. Someone had finally seen. Someone was finally questioning the narrative that everyone else had accepted. The room went silent, and I could feel the confusion and irritation of people being interrupted during such a solemn moment. I could imagine the looks being exchanged, the dismissive thoughts about the janitor who didn't understand that this wasn't the time or place, but Marcus persisted. His voice stronger now, saying, "I've been watching him for a few minutes, and his eyes keep moving. Just little movements, but they're definitely moving. And I don't think that's normal for someone who's supposed to be brain dead." The words hung in the air like a lifeline being thrown to a drowning man, and I tried with every fiber of my being to move my eyes again, to prove Marcus right, to show everyone that he wasn't crazy or mistaken, that there was still someone home inside this failing body. I heard footsteps approaching quickly, heard a doctor's voice asking, "What are you talking about?" Heard Marcus explaining what he'd seen, and then I felt hands on my face, felt someone lifting my eyelids, felt light being shined directly into my eyes, and I knew this was my moment, my only chance, the one opportunity I would get to prove I was still here. And I gathered every ounce of strength and will and desperation and focused it all on one simple task, moving my eyes to the right, just a little bit, just enough to show intentional movement, just enough to prove Marcus right and give myself a chance at life. Did you know that the smallest actions can sometimes require the greatest effort? That something as simple as moving your eyes, something you do thousands of times a day without thinking, can become an impossible mountain to climb when your body has betrayed you and your brain is fighting through damage and inflammation and all the barriers that separate consciousness from action? I want you to think about that the next time you blink or look around a room, because those automatic movements that you take for granted became my entire world in that moment, became the difference between being buried alive and being saved, and the effort required was so immense that I felt like I was trying to move a boulder with my mind, trying to break through concrete with sheer willpower, trying to accomplish the impossible through nothing but determination and the desperate desire to live. The light was so bright in my eyes it felt like it was burning into my brain, and I could hear the doctor saying, "There's no response. This is just reflex. We need to continue with the service." But Marcus's voice cut in again, more insistent now, saying, "No. Wait, watch, please just watch for another minute. I know I saw something." And the fact that this janitor was arguing with a doctor during my funeral, the fact that this man who everyone wanted to dismiss and ignore was standing his ground and demanding they pay attention, gave me strength I didn't know I had. gave me a reason to try harder, to push further, to break through the barriers that held me captive. And then it happened. I felt the connection fire, felt the neural pathway open, felt my eye muscle respond to my command, and my eyes moved, deliberately, unmistakably, tracking the light that the doctor was shining, following it to the right, then pausing, then moving back to the left. And the gasp that went through that chapel was like oxygen being pumped back into a suffocating room, like hope being resurrected from the grave of accepted reality, like the universe itself taking a sharp breath of surprise. The doctor's hands were shaking as he tested me again, asking me to follow the light, telling me to move my eyes if I could hear him. And I did. I moved them. I proved I was there. I showed everyone that Marcus had been right, that this janitor who they barely noticed had just saved my life by paying attention when everyone else had stopped looking. Chaos erupted in that chapel. People crying and shouting and trying to understand what was happening. Medical staff being called. My funeral turning into a rescue operation. And through it all I could hear Marcus's voice, quiet and humble, saying I just thought something looked different. I just wanted to make sure, and I wanted to tell him that he was a hero, that he had given me back my life, that I would spend the rest of my days grateful to this man who society had taught me not to see. The next hours and days were a blur of medical activity, tests being run, specialists being consulted, protocols being completely revised as everyone tried to understand how they had missed this, how someone could be conscious and aware while showing minimal brain activity on scans, how locked-in syndrome could present in ways that fooled even experienced neurologists. They discovered that the specific pattern of my brain damage had created a situation where traditional tests for consciousness failed, where the parts of my brain that controlled movement and communication were so severely impaired that my awareness was essentially invisible to standard medical evaluation, and that if Marcus hadn't noticed those tiny eye movements, if he hadn't spoken up, if everyone hadn't been forced to look again, I would have been declared dead, and possibly even buried. While still conscious, a thought that still fills me with horror years later. The road to recovery was long and brutal. Months of intensive therapy to retrain my brain, to rebuild neural pathways, to reconnect my consciousness to my body in ways that would allow me to function again. And there were times during that recovery when the pain and frustration were so overwhelming that I wondered if being locked in forever might have been easier. But then I would remember my daughter singing at my funeral, remember Sarah's tears, remember Marcus's insistence that something was different, and I would find the strength to keep fighting, to keep pushing, to reclaim the life that had almost been taken from me. It's been 3 years since that day in the chapel, 3 years since I attended my own funeral and was saved by a janitor's observation, and I'm not going to lie and tell you that everything is perfect now, because it's not. I still have deficits, still struggle with things that used to be easy, still have nightmares about being trapped in the darkness while the world moved on without me. But I'm here. I'm alive. I can hold my children and kiss my wife and tell my parents I love them, and that's everything. That's the whole world. That's the miracle that Marcus gave me when he decided to speak up instead of staying silent. I've thought a lot about what happened, about the lessons hidden in that terrible experience, about what it means to truly see people, to pay attention to the ones society trains us to overlook, to value every human being regardless of their job or status, or the assumptions we make about their worth. Marcus saved my life not because he was a doctor or a specialist or someone with impressive credentials, but because he was present, because he was paying attention, because he valued life enough to question what everyone else had accepted. And if that doesn't make you rethink how you see the world and the people in it, then I don't know what will. I want you to understand something really important, something that this experience taught me at a cost I hope you never have to pay. Every person you meet, every individual you encounter, has value and purpose and potential that goes far beyond what you can see on the surface. And the person who saves your life, who changes your trajectory, who makes the crucial difference in your darkest moment, might be someone you would normally walk past without noticing, someone whose name you don't know, someone whose contribution to the world seems small or insignificant or easily dismissed. And that should change how you move through life, how you treat people, how you acknowledge the humanity in everyone around you. Marcus didn't save me because he wanted recognition or reward or gratitude. He saved me because he saw something that didn't seem right, and he cared enough to say something. And that simple act of caring, That willingness to interrupt and question and insist that someone pay attention became the difference between life and death for me and my family. Do you pay attention to the people around you? Do you really see them? Or do you look through them like they're part of the scenery? Have you ever dismissed someone because of their job or their appearance, or your assumptions about their value? Comment below and be honest with yourself, because this story should make all of us reflect on how we see and treat the people who make our world function. The other profound lesson from my experience is about the fragility of life and the importance of living with intention and presence and gratitude for every single moment we're given, because you never know when an ordinary Tuesday will become the day that changes everything, when a simple headache will be the warning sign of catastrophe, when the goodbye you give your family in the morning will be the last time they see you conscious and aware. And I don't mean to be morbid or depressing, but I mean to shake you awake if you're sleepwalking through your life, taking things for granted, postponing joy and connection and meaning because you think you have unlimited time. Because you don't. None of us do. And the people I saw grieving at my funeral, the pain they experienced, the love they expressed, all of it should have been shared while I could hear it and respond to it and reciprocate it. And the fact that I got a second chance to do that is a gift I don't take lightly. But most people don't get that chance. Most people don't get to come back from the edge and tell their families how much they love them. So don't wait. Don't postpone. Don't assume there will always be tomorrow, because for some people tomorrow never comes. I think about Marcus all the time, about the fact that this man who everyone overlooked, who cleaned floors and emptied trash and moved through the hospital like a ghost that nobody acknowledged, became the most important person in my life story, became the hero who gave me everything back, and we've stayed in touch, my family and Marcus. We have dinner together sometimes. My kids call him Uncle Marcus, and he's become part of our story in a way that feels both profound and perfectly natural, like he was always meant to be there. Like the universe arranged things exactly right even when everything seemed wrong. He tells me he was just doing what anyone would do, but we both know that's not true, because plenty of people were in that chapel. Plenty of people saw my body lying there. Plenty of people had opportunities to notice what he noticed, but they didn't, because they had already decided what they were seeing, had already accepted the narrative, had already stopped looking for signs of life. And Marcus's gift wasn't just observation, but the willingness to trust what he saw even when it contradicted what everyone else believed. And that kind of courage, that willingness to speak up when it would be easier to stay silent, is rare and precious and literally life-saving. If you're still watching this, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, then I want you to take something away from my story, beyond just the shock and the drama and the miracle of survival. I want you to take away a commitment to see people differently, to value every human being you encounter, to pay attention to the world around you in ways that might seem small but can have enormous impact, to speak up when something doesn't seem right, even if everyone else is telling you to be quiet, to live with intention and gratitude and presence because you never know when everything might change, and to tell the people you love that you love them, not someday, not when it's convenient, but now, today, while you can still reach them and hold them and make sure they know how much they mean to you. My second chance at life came because someone I would have walked past without noticing decided that my life was worth saving, decided to trust his observations over everyone else's expertise, decided that interrupting a funeral was worth the risk if it meant giving someone a chance at survival, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift, trying to honor Marcus's courage by living fully and intentionally, and with awareness of how precious and fragile and miraculous this experience of being alive truly is. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a moment that changed your perspective on life? Have you ever been saved by someone unexpected? Or been that unexpected savior for someone else? Have you learned to pay attention to the people around you? Really see them? Value them? Acknowledge their humanity and importance? Share your stories below, because your experiences matter, your voice matters, your journey matters, and we're all in this together, navigating the fragile miracle of existence and hopefully learning to do it with more compassion and awareness and gratitude. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think differently about the world and the people in it, if it reminded you how precious life is and how important it is to notice and care and speak up when something doesn't seem right, then please hit that like button, because it helps me share this message with more people who need to hear it. And please subscribe to I Live to Tell for more incredible true stories of survival, second chances, and the extraordinary moments that define our lives. And make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you see the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring enough to watch until the end. And remember that every single day is a gift. Every person you meet has value. And sometimes the most important voice in the room is the one nobody expected to hear. So pay attention, stay present, and never underestimate the power of one person who decides to care when everyone else has stopped looking.